What's up, y'all? We are back with another edition of DNVR Rams Live. As always, I am your host, Justin Michael. Hope everybody's had a great week. It's been 7 days since we went live last. Bit of a tongue twister to get us going here. I was able to enjoy a little bit of time off. I appreciate everybody for the birthday wishes and the advice. It's officially the first edition of this podcast in my 30s, so I can now be the middle-aged man that I've always been in spirit. Anybody that's listened to this show going all the way back to when we first started it nearly 7 years ago, they know I've basically always been an old man at heart. I've always had an audience that's, stemmed a little bit on the more middle-aged side. So I think it's going to be a nice little stage of life that I can kind of transition into here. But I really do appreciate all of the just really kind messages and everything that I got on various social media platforms. The CSU Rams community certainly knows how to make a guy feel special. So shout out to all you. Really appreciate it. Unsurprisingly, I try and take a little bit of time off, and the recruiting trail, it just goes crazy for CSU. 11 commits last weekend, and that's not even including the two tight ends that committed on Thursday and Friday before that. Really, really impressive stretch from that CSU staff. We are going to get into that and break down, the public commits we know so far, how this 2026 class is starting to shape up, all of that fun stuff. While I was away, the Pac-12 also had some news, or the future Pac-12, I guess I should say. All 8 members have signed their grant of rights agreement, which is big. That means we are within a shouting distance of getting that media deal announced. I do expect that any day now, as well as expansion news. I'm excited to just get through this process and finally, just have a little bit of clarity on what this is all going to look like moving forward. I already know that no matter how this plays out, the reactions to it are going to be very predictable. There's going to be people that mock the Pac-12 and say, see, this isn't a real power conference. How could you even expect to be one? There will be people that will say, oh, they should have just merged with the Mountain West. There will be people like CSU fans, I assume, who will point out that the next move isn't necessarily the last move, and also assuming that you're going to get a nice little bump in media revenue, assuming you're going to have a nice exposure window, being on an accessible channel, all that. Some of the reported media outlets that are going to be in the mix, ESPN, CBS, the CW, all those are good options to be involved with. It's going to be a win. I mean, you're going to probably at least double up what the Mountain West ultimately gets. I don't really see any scenario in which you wouldn't, just based on the schools that are going to be a part of this. We've debated, who it could be in terms of the next expansion move for months, and I don't think we need to go through that whole song and dance again. But I will say, I think there's a lot of creative options still on the table here, and there's a lot of stuff that's being rumored, obviously, but, like you could get Memphis, and even if it's as a football only ordeal, if you get a basketball scheduling agreement, that's still a pretty decent win, and it probably would open up the relationship for, a potential full member add down the line. Same thing with like UConn on a football only side. Maybe you're interested in St. Mary's or something like that. There's a lot of options. The writing on the wall does seem like UTSA or Texas State will likely be in the mix, and I've been pretty honest that neither of those schools do a ton for me personally, but I also understand that you just got to fill this league, and there are selling points to those schools, just more access to the state of Texas from a recruiting standpoint, being able to have that visibility. There are benefits for sure, and you could do worse. That's not to say that would be disastrous or anything like that. Honestly, I feel like they already have the schools that were really important for the foundation of this conference. If you're able to establish something here and get it going over these next couple of years, there's always a possibility of further expansion. And I don't know. I'm just bracing myself for the hot takes and overreactions that are going to come either way. Everything I'm hearing behind the scenes is very optimistic. So I think that media deal is going to be a nice little package for the Pac-12. I think that the future is very bright. So I'm excited to see it. Good morning to everybody in the Toyota chat. Awesome to see a couple of comments already rolling in. Taylor brings up Maya Lessner could secure a natty soon. That's true. Potential for some, really great exposure for CSU as a university and as an athletic department. She's had an incredible career. Obviously, we don't talk a ton about track and field. Admittedly, I don't know a ton about track and field, but she's just been a beast the entire time, one of the best throwers in the world, quite literally. And it's been really cool to see. If you saw back, there was a press conference with Maya and some of the track stars that are, competing in nationals. And she actually mentioned that it was, or Brian Bedard actually mentioned that it was Brock Lesnar that reached out to CSU. They were the ones that sought out CSU in the first place. And I just think that's really cool how that's all worked out. And kind of funny that, Brock's daughter ends up being a champion at CSU. Now we got Scott Steiner's son playing basketball. The WWE connections are abundant at the moment. And, Hidatora Hanada, he just signed a developmental deal, so we could see him in WWE someday. I think CU has Goldberg's kid too. So just kind of funny how that's all played out here along the Front Range. But big news will be coming soon with the Pac-12. You're going to see people mock the name of it. I responded to, I think it was Jeff Schwartz. He made a comment the other day about how it's still pretty silly to call this the Pacific 12 Conference. And maybe to an extent, he's right. It's obviously not going to be the conference that it was, but I pointed out the Big Ten is a conference of 18 teams. The Big 12 has 16 teams. The Pac-12 is really the one that we're going to mock here. As an Oregon alum in particular, and they're a big reason all of this happened, I just couldn't help but roll my eyes a little bit. But keeping that Pac-12 branding is big, no matter how all this pans out. Just having that IP, having that brand recognition is huge. And so I'm really excited to see how that all plays out. Shout out to Larry McCray in the Toyota chat. Jacob McCray's dad here stumbled upon the podcast. Awesome job. We're heading out for his official visit tomorrow morning. Love to hear it. We're excited to have Jacob in Rams country. One of many exciting commits for this 2026 class. Again, we're going to talk about that pretty in depth today. I guess we can just kind of get on into it here. Before we talk about the individuals specifically, I just kind of wanted to talk about CSU in general. Their recruiting approach has always been pretty close to how NFL teams approach the NFL draft. And I think a lot of that has to do, or I guess I know it has to do with Jay Norvell's time in the NFL, because he's come on this show in the past and talked about it pretty openly with us. They're not looking necessarily for absurd stats or 5-star ranking or 8 million offers or even positional experience at times. Like, really, it's coming down to athletic traits and kind of the type of people that these players are. They want to make sure they're good system fits. They want to make sure they're good cultural fits as well. I've really been impressed the last couple of years what CSU has done from a high school recruiting standpoint. Some of those guys have ultimately left through the portal, which is obviously part of the deal these days. And that's just how it's going to be moving forward. You're going to win some, you're going to lose some. But going back to this winter when CSU, hired Alex Collins as a general manager, really increased their investment in the recruiting personnel and the staff as a whole, you hoped that it would pay dividends. And I think based on what we're seeing so far, both through the spring window and what this staff was able to do in the portal, and then, now what they're doing from a high school standpoint, I think it's pretty clear that it is paying dividends right off the bat. I mean, it was shaping up to potentially be a hairy situation based on the amount of experience and the contributors from last year's team that they lost to the portal, going into early February. I'd say a lot of people were kind of anxious. I think they were excited about the return of Tyson Summers as the defensive coordinator. I think they were intrigued by the addition of a general manager and what that could mean. But it was just a lot of unknown. And I feel like in terms of what was lost versus what was added through the portal, now that we've had, a couple of months to see the whole picture paint out, or just see the whole story play out, I guess would be a better way to phrase it. I've been really impressed. Like, they filled every positional hole that I felt like I had seen through, a couple of spring practices, and it wasn't like they were glaring or anything like that, but it was just small things. They're a little bit light in the interior defensive line. They could probably use a little bit of size there. What do? They go out and add a couple of 300-pounders from, power forward programs. Felt like they could use another receiver just based on, LB not panning out. What do? They go out and they get PD Tucker. I really like what this staff has done from a recruiting standpoint going back to the winter. Thought they had a really successful stretch in the portal. I thought they filled every potential need. Kicker was another one that I was pretty worried about. And then, getting Isaiah Hankins, not 100% on that. Probably Hankins from Baylor, a guy who I thought probably could have, gone to a Power 4 program. I've just been impressed. And that's continued into this high school class here. And I think the future is bright. I think they've got a nice foundation in terms of what was already on the roster. We're seeing, the staff going out and getting really intriguing players with versatile athletic profiles. And some of these guys are maybe a little bit under the radar, but they passed the eye test with flying colors. And I just think this 2026 class has a chance to really shape up pretty nicely here. We're going to take a quick break here. We're going to shout out couple of our partners, then we're going to get into these guys, give a couple of thoughts on these commits individually. We're going to talk a lot about this class in the next month or so. There's just obviously not a ton going on in the college sports world in June and July, but we're going to really go in depth. We'll start looking at the future. We're going to try and get some of these commits on the show as well. Like I said, we're going to take a quick break here, shout out a couple of our partners. We've all been there. Your parlay is one leg away, and then the Rockies bullpen does what they did the other day, and they blow a 3-run lead in the 9th. Boom, kill ya, heartbreak. If it sounds familiar, the Hall of Fame app is built to fix that. It was started by 2 lifelong sports fans who happen to be Ivy League grads. The Hall of Fame app makes parlay research smarter, faster, and data-driven. This is not your buddy's group chat full of hot takes. It's an analytics game. The Hall of Fame app gives you access to advanced stats, historical data, powerful tools to help you bet smarter. The app is built for the everyday sports fan, so it's easy and intuitive to use. You'll get an idea of your parlay's chances to hit, identify weak legs so you can weed them out before you place them, whether it's the NFL, MLB, college football, whatever you're into. They believe anything the books know, you should know too. And just because it's a parlay doesn't mean it has to be a dumb bet. Our listeners get a 7-day free trial plus 50% off their first month. Just download the Hall of Fame app or visit hofbets.com. Use that code DNVR at checkout. Again, for a limited time only, our listeners not only get a 7-day free trial, but they get 50% off their first month when they use the code DNVR at checkout. Just download the Hall of Fame app on iOS or Android. Visit hofbets.com. Enter that code DNVR, and you are all set. Just like your favorite team needs a home field advantage, your home needs a home floor advantage. Empire Today can help you get it. Empire Today has flooring experts, dedicated flooring professionals who focus on flooring every single day. Look, guys, we've all been to those big box stores. You wander endlessly. Somehow, you're hoping that you're going to get the right product. You don't even know if the people there working are experts in their field. With Empire Today, they live and breathe flooring, so they're going to be with you every step of the way. It's just a whole different ball game. The flooring experts bring the showroom right to you. It really is an easy process. Schedule a free in-home estimate today because some things are just better at home. DNVR listeners can get a $350 discount using the promo code DNVR. You heard that right. A $350 discount with the code DNVR. Restrictions to apply. Visit EmpireToday/DNVR for details. All right, let's get into this 2026 class. Last week we talked about some of the guys that we knew so far. Based on the public commitments that have gone, they posted, I guess is what I'm trying to say. The class is up to 10, but we know they got 11 commits last weekend alone. we also knew that there were at least 7 commits before those 11. So, I mean, there's going to be 7 or 8 more commits that announce either this month or, in the coming weeks here. I know a few of them. I don't know all of them. I have told my people behind the scenes that I will allow those high school players to announce their commitments on their own terms. So I'm not going to spoil their moment. That's a policy that I've kind of always had. It is something that is kind of always ebbing and flowing in terms of the way you operate, just because the game has changed so much since I first started talking about this 10 years ago. But basically how I try and approach it now is whether I can, scoop it or not, I'm not going to do that to high school kids, because I think they deserve an opportunity to announce their big moment on their own. It's a huge life decision, and you should have that opportunity. Sometimes guys aren't big on social media and they don't care, and they'll allow me to break it for them. Other than that, though, I usually just wait for them to do it on their own, because, again, I just think they deserve that moment. Transfer news, that's a little bit different. Personally, I just feel like now, once you're in college and you're making 6-7 figure moves, it's closer to professional free agency and more or less fair game at that point. They've got agents speaking for them. It's just a whole different ball game. But when kids are 17, 18 years old, I want to give them an opportunity to have that moment. But we do know that Darnell Kelly, quarterback out of Langston Hughes High School, he was the first commit for this class. He's on board. Tight end Arlie Morrell, Alexander Brewer, Jace Winchester, and Jacob McCray. We've talked about those guys over the last couple of weeks. If you missed that show last Friday or last Thursday, I think it was, go back and check that out. Again, we've talked about those offensive linemen. Tight end Arlie Morrell, really intriguing prospect out of Kansas. And, of course, Darnell Kelly, the 2026 QB prospect. I'm also going to get a ton of written content out on these guys in the coming weeks. I've been a little behind on that, just based on the Stanley Cup playoffs and covering the Avalanche and all that, and then trying to take a little bit of time off. It's just been kind of a whirlwind, really, since the end of March Madness. I've never really had a year like I've had in terms of just going nonstop, and my coverage responsibilities, they've just increased so much, covering multiple teams at once and doing the newsletter. It's just been a lot, but I'm obviously always going to be really locked in on CSU, and it's always going to be the primary focus on this show. With that in mind, let's talk about this 2026 class. More or less, and these are going to be based on the order that they committed, but that might have a guy wrong here or there. But these are the guys that have committed since our last show a week ago. Starting with Jude Nelson, who was somebody who I mentioned on last Thursday's show to keep an eye on. Knew he was on an official visit. The staff was very hopeful that they were going to be able to land him. He visited Boise State at the end of May, and whenever you're going up against Boise, as a conference mate, it's always a tough battle in the recruiting ground. Boise, San Diego State, Fresno, CSU, we all recruit a lot of the same players, and that makes sense. Just regionally, you're all going to have a really heavy presence in California, throughout Arizona, Washington, really the whole Pacific Northwest, and then obviously, Colorado, Arizona, Texas, Florida, the typical spots. But we're in on the same guys, and a lot of times, Boise, just based on their prestige, based on the success that they've had, that's a big brand draw, and they've had some flash and appeal that's been tough to keep up with over the years. And I've talked a lot about how I do feel like the gap has closed, from a talent standpoint. The gap between Boise and the rest of the league, it just isn't what it used to be. You can see it based on how much more competitive the matchups are. It's not 2011 where Kellen Moore's hanging 70 on you. Now, they've still been a highly, highly successful team. This is not me throwing shade or trying to drag the program down or anything like that. But it's just not what it used to be. And I think if you're UNLV, I think if you're CSU, San Diego State, Fresno, you're all hoping that you can kind of snatch that throne from Boise and the Pac-12 era. And obviously this 2026 class, it's going to be the first class for CSU in the Pac-12. Imagine that's something that's being pitched pretty consistently on the recruiting trail. That's exciting. It's new is always exciting. And I think that's an advantage for these schools, is that you have some traction. You're trendy at the moment. You're in the conversation. And you're hoping to get kids on board that want to be a part of something special. I've been pretty open about how this move to the Pac-12 is objectively a gamble, but it's also betting on yourself. And if you're CSU, if you're Boise State, if you're San Diego State, what really do you have to lose at this point? You've been passed over in these last couple of cycles of realignment. All these schools have had ambitions of being in a bigger conference going back a decade plus. I mean, I remember in 2014, 2015, when those Big 12 rumors started to really circulate, I think schools like CSU and Boise went as far as, pitching themselves to the Big 12. It didn't obviously pan out. They didn't really ultimately expand to the G5 options until Texas and Oklahoma left for the SEC. But it's a really big time for programs like CSU, like Boise, who are betting on themselves, and they are trying to keep pace in this modern era of college football. They've got the facilities. CSU, especially from a university standpoint, it's got everything to offer. It's a great school. It's an incredible college town. It's an amazing place to live. Now the key is taking things to the next level. And we've talked a lot about how 2025 is a big year for the program. You took a major step in the right direction this past season. You win a couple of rivalry games. You get to 8 wins, a mark you hadn't reached in a decade. You get back to a bowl game for the first time since 2017. You beat Air Force in the Springs for the first time since 2002. But you do blow the opportunity to compete for a conference championship. You get rolled in the bowl game. A lot of wonky circumstances with that matchup, albeit. But, I mean, no excuses. You got punched in the mouth by Miami of Ohio. And despite all of the success that you had, it still kind of left everybody hoping for more. So you're hoping that this year, 2026 and beyond, you really kick the door down. And I think there's a lot of reasons to believe in the potential of CSU, and recruiting is a big part of that. They've gone out these last couple of years and they've established a strong foundation of the roster. And now moving forward, they're continuing that by recruiting really versatile athletes that translate well, that come in with diverse backgrounds. They love those multi-sport athletes. They love guys that play multiple positions. I really believe in the approach that they have from a recruiting standpoint. That doesn't necessarily mean that every guy's going to pan out or that every guy's going to stick around. Like, even some of these guys that have committed over the last week or so, odds are a handful of them at some point between now and December will decommit, will commit elsewhere. That's, again, just part of the game. But to see the success that this staff is having and to see the type of guys that they're landing and the schools that they're landing them over, I just think it's really, really intriguing regarding the direction of this program. And I think that, again, that investment in the staff from a recruitment standpoint is really paying off right away here. And you see it with the type of guys that they're getting and the schools that they're committing over. I know that was kind of a long-winded tangent there, but I do think we somewhat brought it full circle. Getting back to Jude Nelson, where all of this started, landing him over Boise and UNLV and Fresno. He had offers from Arizona State, from BYU. I mean, schools that were in the Big 12 championships, multiple schools that were in the college football playoff, even, Washington State, who maybe doesn't feel like they're in a different weight class anymore, just based on how they got left behind. Obviously, we're going to be in the same league moving forward. I just think it's really exciting. I really like what I see from him on film. I do want to make it clear, not just with Nelson, but with all these guys, when you're talking about what you see from a huddle evaluation, you got to take everything with a grain of salt. They're only going to show the good stuff first and foremost. Also, it's just a really small sample size, and I think it's easy to get carried away, but I do think you can identify certain aspects that make a guy potentially intriguing as a prospect. And when you look at Nelson, 29 catches for 357 yards and 5 touchdowns last year, the stats, they aren't absurd. He also had 4 sacks as a defensive end, but when you put this guy's huddle on and you see the way he moves out there with that big, large frame, he's exciting. It does seem like most of the time he is just overwhelming people with his size and strength and athleticism. He's the biggest, strongest kid on the field. He's the best athlete. There's not a lot that these guys are able to do with him. He's obviously going to be going up against much better athletes consistently at the collegiate level. But I love the way he uses it to his advantage. He just overwhelms people as a defensive end. just bull rushes and goes right through the offensive tackle. He's got a lot of length, so he can get his hands on people. He moves well as a quick first step. I mean, it's all great, but I think as a tight end, potentially in this, you know, essentially a pro style offense with air raid concepts, he's going to be a really natural fit. He catches with his hands, which you love to see at the high school level. That can be kind of a 50-50 proposition. There can be guys that have 100 catches and 15 touchdowns, and then you know put on the film and they're catching with their chest. I love that he goes up and gets it. I think he's going to be a really dangerous threat in the red zone. He runs over people as a blocker. Again, it's not really fair. He's so much bigger and stronger than everybody you're seeing him go up against. But I love that he has that mentality. I think, you know, in particular as a tight end, you're going to have to be a little bit more physical, you know, than you are as a receiver, although that is a big emphasis for CSU. And I think that's one of the things that was really underrated about Torrey Horton at receiver, you know, these last couple of years. Obviously, he was a freak athlete. He was a superstar, but they want guys that are going to be able to block because they run a lot of quick screens. You know, they love to run to the sidelines and stretch plays and stuff like that. It's going to be something you have to do. He's going to fit. I think that when you can get a guy that's that big, that's that athletic at 18, 19 years old, you know, we can refine some of the smaller things, you know, become a more complete route runner, the type of stuff that all guys are going to have to work on coming out of high school. I'm not trying to say he's a poor route runner or anything like that, but they don't have to get all that complicated right now because he's just a beast. You know, we'll just do a little quick screen, boom, he's gone in the open field, or he's running straight through your chest. You know, in the red zone, we're just going to throw it up and he's going to go up and get it because there's not a corner that has a chance of covering this guy. He's got 5 inches and, you know, 50 pounds on every single one of them out there. But to land him over Boise, over UNLV, over BYU, he is really, really exciting. And I think that is a big win for CSU, especially because he'd already visited Boise. So for him to commit on the spot, you know, that's a testament to, you know, what this staff is doing and what they're, you know, pitching, and obviously all of the resources that CSU has as an institution. Canvas Stadium's incredible. You know, it doesn't take a back seat to any of these other schools. The training facility, even the swag, you know, our Ag Day uniforms go so hard. It cracks me up a little bit. Like basically every commitment post is with the Ag Day unis and not the standard green and gold. But why wouldn't they, man? They go so hard. I just really like what Jude Nelson brings to the table. I think he is a big commitment. We're going to talk about the rest of these guys here as well. Do need to shout out a couple of our other partners real quick, but I don't want to go on too long of a tangent here. So let's take a quick break, and then we'll get into the rest of this 2026 class. Looking for banking that plays at your pace? Whether you're tailgating, grabbing halftime snacks, or catching the game from the couch, First Bank is in your corner. With their secure, easy-to-use mobile banking app, you can check your balance with a tab for stadium nachos, stay on top of your money anytime, anywhere. It's like having an MVP in your pocket. Here's the play that pays. You could earn $300 when you open a new First Bank checking account, use it to score tickets on the Nuggets, the Avalanche, maybe put a deposit down for season tickets, you know, for CSU this fall. First Bank makes managing your money feel like a win. No games, just solid tools to help you stay in control right from your phone. If you're ready to take your banking game to the next level, head to efirstbank.com/bonus. That's efirstbank.com/bonus. Certain restrictions and requirements apply. Member FDIC. I also want to talk to you guys about Mando. Mando, of course, is a men's deodorant brand hyper-focused on keeping every aspect of the men's body smelling fresh as a daisy. They really do mean every aspect. This isn't just your standard underarm deodorant. This is whole body deodorant. You can put it on any of your stinky areas, you know, your pits, but also, you know, maybe you got a really sweaty back, you know, your butt crack, your balls, your grundle, all of the smelly stuff. It is smelly season. You want to make sure that you're smelling nice, especially if you're out on the town, something like that. Nothing kills the vibe quicker than just nasty BO. It was created by a doctor who saw firsthand how normal BO was being misdiagnosed and mistreated. And with Mando's starter pack, it's a great way for the customers to try out their awesome products. It's going to come with solid stick deodorant, cream tube deodorant, plus 2 free products of your choice. They got mini body wash, deodorant wipes, all kinds of great options. As a special offer for our listeners, new customers get a $5 discount on their starter pack with our exclusive code. That equates to 40% off your starter pack. Use the code DNVR at shopmando.com, shopmando.com. Please support our show. Tell them we sent you. Smell fresher, stay drier, boost your confidence from head to toe with Mando. Right here. On the second half of the show, we're going to keep talking recruiting. It's the 2-year anniversary of the Nuggets winning an NBA championship. I'll talk about some of the more fun CSU memories from the last decade as well, assuming we still have time. That might be something we save for tomorrow. But obviously right now we're still talking 2026 recruiting. You wouldn't mind giving us a thumbs up on YouTube. I certainly would appreciate it. Keep those comments flowing in the Toyota chat. If I don't get to it right away, we'll star it and I can come back around at the end of the show. It can be about recruiting, it can be about CSU questions, comments. Shoot, it can be about grilling or mowing the lawn. Those are some of my favorite hobbies as well. But right now we're talking recruiting. We're talking about this awesome 2026 class. And Yasir Jackson is who I would like to talk about next. He is, in my opinion, the definition of a diamond in the rough. 6'3", 175 pounds. He's out of Oakland High School in Oakland, California. 247 has him listed as a three-star prospect with offers from Sacramento State and Delaware State. I was surprised that he did not have more recruiting interest based on, his highlight tape there. Committed to CSU on June 8th. He comes in, versatile profile, a lot like Jude Nelson, played both sides of the ball, wide receiver, linebacker, and safety. 22 catches, 476 yards, 8 touchdowns as a receiver last year. He was a home run hitter. It's a lot of him breaking big plays. 107 tackles, 16 tackles for loss, and 3 interceptions on defense. So this guy was doing basically everything for Oakland. I don't know a ton about the program, but it just based on the other guys that you saw on the field, it seems like, maybe not the most high profile program. Quarterback certainly left a lot to be desired. I think you put this guy with a big time QB with a big arm, he could be nasty. And I think he could be really, really dangerous. And again, I think this guy has a chance to be a real diamond for CSU. Still growing into his frame, 6'3", 175. He's lanky. He's definitely a skinny guy out there, and he's going to have to put some meat on those bones over the next couple of years. He's going to, still growing into that frame. I'm sure he shot up over these last couple of years. But what stands out for a guy with that much length, he is quick and agile. He's really fast too. But a lot of guys, at that size, once they get going, once they hit full stride, they're fast and they're hard to bring down. But he's shifty in the open field. His lateral mobility is really impressive. There were a couple instances where, they throw him a quick screen in the backfield and he makes a guy miss, then puts his foot in the ground and gets upfield and he's just gone. I mean, it looked like a mini Demaryius Thomas with the Broncos back in the day. I think there's a lot to like about him. I mean, I'm sure he has some refinement to do when it comes to, his route tree and all of that. But you see the athleticism, you see the speed, you see that frame. I think he's got a potential to be really, really good. And again, I'm just not used to seeing guys that are 6'3" plus being that quick and really being able to move that way. I mean, we'll see. Riley Fisher in the Toyota chat says probably ends up on defense. That's possible as well. I mean, a guy with that type of athleticism, and obviously, like we said, he's got 116 tackles. I could see that. Maybe you make him a safety. With the amount of ground he's able to cover, I mean, I guess you could put him at linebacker too. He seems a little thin for that, but I do think, based on what I'd heard, I thought he was going to be a receiver. But I guess we shall see. Really, really intriguing athletic profile, though. And again, somebody I think that could be a diamond in the rough for CSU. Another guy that I'm really, really excited about is linebacker John McClellan. His stats are insane. We'll see. Maybe I'm going to butcher this pronunciation. Out of Rancho Cotate High School out in California, 6'3", 215 pounds, 3-star recruit on 247. He committed to CSU over UNLV, Nevada, Northern Arizona, Sac State. 157 tackles as a junior. That's 1 year worth of stats, not multiple. 15 tackles for loss, 5.5 sacks. Also had a couple of touchdowns. He's a running back, returns kicks, plays linebacker. Just your prototypical beast of an athlete. You know, a lot like we talked about with Jude Nelson. He's just a freak athlete, and he's really so much more athletic than anybody else on the field. They don't really stand a chance. You don't want to get too carried away, obviously. Like a lot of these guys are going to dominate at the high school level, but like he's pretty freaky. He's got tremendous instincts, covers a ton of ground. I like to, you know, sometimes with guys that run really well on the defensive side, they have great instincts, but they can do a little bit too much. You know, they can over pursue, stuff like that. I think what really stood out to me more than anything, aside from how well he moves, how rangy he is sideline to sideline, he's a sure tackler. I like that he was patient. I like that he let plays develop, and then he trusted his ability to cover ground and make plays. You know, there are a lot of instances where he drops back, he's reading, then boom, reacts and goes and makes a play. You know, guys at the high school level often like they're running around, you know, like dogs, you know, chasing a bone, and they're not necessarily thinking about the next step. You can see how well he sees the game, and I'm sure it's a benefit, you know, having that running back and linebacker background, but man, does he cover a ton of ground. He's good in pass coverage. I think he could be a stud. You know, kind of watching him, it reminds me a little bit of watching Owen Long a couple of years ago. Just a kid that is puts his head downhill as running back. You know, it's not a lot of cuteness to his game. He'll run through you, he'll run past you, and then he uses that to his advantage as a linebacker with the way he's able to really just cover a ton of ground there. Not necessarily a thumper based on what I've seen, which is what I would say about Ace Brown, who we'll talk about in a second. But he is a very sure tackler, you know, wraps people up, finishes plays. And again, like it's tough to argue with that type of production. 157 tackles, 15 tackles for loss, 5.5 sacks. I'm not surprised he has success as a pass rusher as well, because he's so quick. I would love to see some packages, you know, with him and like a veteran Owen Long on the field in a couple of years, knock on wood, assuming he sticks around, you know, and that's always I don't even know if you can say 50-50 guess, you know, these days, but I really like, you know, what we see from McClellan, really like what we see from Ace Brown. He flipped his commitment from Eastern Michigan to CSU, 6'2", 215 pounds. He's out of Akron, Ohio. Had one of the better commitment posts I've ever seen. Really, really humble, but he just talked about, you know, how the minute that he came to CSU, he fell in love with the campus and the proud history and the coaches, and it got me going. I was ready to run through a wall for him. Originally committed to Eastern Michigan, but he had offers from Kentucky, West Virginia, Illinois, Miami of Ohio, and Toledo, among others. He committed on June 11th. Kevin Lytle interviewed him while I was on vacation. He told Kevin that Coach Sintum, the linebackers coach, had previously recruited him at Illinois, and that those relationships, you know, came full circle now at CSU. He has an 86-inch wingspan, which is insane. That was one of the things he told Kevin about. Really has only been rushing the passer for a couple of years now, but with those long arms, they're like, this is somebody we got to get in the trenches. And what's cool about, you know, what he can do at CSU under Summers is you can kind of take advantage of that as with the way that they move the linebackers around. You know, sometimes you're going to be upright, sometimes you're going to be hand in the ground. They really do a lot of different stuff with the way they move guys around. And I think he's somebody that can kind of translate either way, you know, as more of a prototypical outside linebacker or, you know, more of an edge rusher. I think he's somebody that can make an impact for you in either of those capacities. His physicality really stands out. Called him a thumper a second ago. I mean, there are a couple of clips there on his huddle where he's laying the wood. His length is obviously going to be a huge advantage. He's able to get his hands on guys before they're able to get them on him. He's also able to get those hands up as a pass rusher, be disruptive, you know, swat some passes down. Like there's a lot of advantages to having that type of wingspan, particularly with how well he's able to carry that 6'2", 215-pound frame. He runs really well. It's only going to get stronger too. I think that's what's exciting. You know, when you have that much length, Like, you're not going to be one of those guys that's, really thick usually. Like, a lot of time you're going to be a little bit lankier. I mean, you can see the muscle already, but that's a guy that, you put on, 10 pounds here over the next couple of years, get bigger, get stronger. He could be a really nice ad for this defense. And I think he's got some NFL traits, which again is really what CSU looks for in the recruiting game on both sides of the ball. Like, they're trying to find NFL players. They're trying to find plus athletes. They're not trying to find guys that are propped up from recruiting rankings or have crazy stats. Like, yes, it's nice if they have those things as well. But a lot of these guys are very, very exciting. And Ace Brown is a big time flip for this CSU staff. I'm pretty intrigued about what he could be as a linebacker. He's rangy sideline to sideline. Again, you love that physicality. That's just like a mentality that you can't really coach. You either play with that or you don't. And he's definitely somebody that does. The most recent commitment, another offensive lineman, Pax Ovihilo out of Hawaii, 6'6", 320 pounds going into his senior year. And sometimes, you hear a guy is 300 plus pounds and you're like, all right, what is that frame like though? And how does he carry it? You see this dude, he can move. Committed to CSU over Cal, ASU, Hawaii, San Diego State, and UTSA. I'm not going to sit here and act like I'm an offensive line expert, like, oh, the hand placement, oh, his foot, like needs to turn the hip there, didn't swivel fast enough. I'm not going to try and bullshit like that. But, you can see little things in terms of how they're going to translate. What's his first step like? What's his mentality? He's got a couple of plays that look like straight Michael Orr out of The Blind Side, where he's just sled dogging somebody like 25 yards down the field. I love that though. I love that he's going to finish the play. I think that for somebody that's 6'6", 320, his first step off the snap is impressive. There's a couple instances of him pulling and stuff like that as a right tackle, and he can move, and obviously you can't teach being 6'6", 320. I think he is a really exciting prospect, and in particular when it comes to offensive line, I just really trust Bill Best's evaluation. I like the guys that they've brought in this 2026 class. We've talked about them a little bit. Jace Winchester out of Dakota Ridge. He'll be probably a guard. Alexander Brewer out of Sequoia, Georgia. He'll likely be a guard as well. And then Jacob McCray, another guy who I expect to be offensive tackle, I would think, 6'4", 285. He could probably go either way. But they're getting guys that not only are big and beefy, but they move well. And that was the problem in the Adazio era. What Norvell inherited in the trenches was, and I don't mean this to be disrespectful to any of those kids. It's not personal or anything like that, but they just had no business being D1 linemen. A lot of them, they were undersized, and like, not only were they undersized, but they weren't that refined. Like, if you're going to be undersized, you better be really technically sound and a dog in the trenches. And that just was not the case. But you can see with the guys that they've brought in these last couple of years, the way they're translating, and right away too, Tanner Morley and Ader Urian Baranchea and some of these guys that are, playing in year two. That's really, really exciting. And again, I think the staff has earned the benefit of the doubt when it comes to, recruits in the trenches there. This 2026 class is coming together really nicely. Again, there's 10 public commits that are, posted, and they've made it official, quote unquote official. It doesn't really mean anything until you sign, but you know what I mean. Expect, 7-8 more in the next week. A couple of guys you should kind of keep your eye on here. I posted about this the other day. I also talked about him last week. Troy Foster is a receiver out of California who I really like a lot. I would like to see CSU land him. 6'2", 190 pounds, 17 total touchdowns last year, 15 receiving. Also returned a couple of kickoffs for scores, 1,300 receiving yards. Just a really smooth, complete prospect. Great hands, fluid in the open field, everything you want to see. Steady route runner. He was originally committed to San Diego State. He was somebody I had my eye on because I knew the staff was talking to him, but also the way he hyped up Jude Nelson's commitment made me raise my eyebrow. So the fact that he decommitted from San Diego State shortly after, that is encouraging. A lot of Mountain West schools going after him. But again, I just feel like he would be a perfect fit in this offense. Troy Foster, somebody to keep an eye on. Keep an eye on Atticus Tillman as well, safety out of Arvada West. I'd mentioned in the past that I expected him to commit. Again, we'll kind of see. But based on some of the stuff we've seen from the safety coach and, some of the hints he's had about, like, keeping them in the state or whatever, like that one seems like it's pretty obvious. We'll kind of see what happens there. Sean in the Toyota chat wants to know, what do I think about Justin Marshall, the running back? I will get to that after the break here, and then we'll have some fun to wrap up the show. Again, keep those questions, comments rolling. We'll get to them as many as we can. All right, let's shout out Toyota. Trucks have always been a part of Toyota's DNA. For generations, Toyota's built durable legends destined for greatness and perfect for Colorado. Whether you're conquering off-road trails or hauling the weight of the world, there's a Toyota truck that's just right for you, like the all-new 2024 Tacoma. The Land Cruiser is back as well. Toyota offers 17 models with available all-wheel drive or four-wheel drive, like the Epic 4Runner. They also offer more low and zero-emission vehicles combined than any other automaker to give customers numerous choices to reduce their carbon footprint. 16 hybrid vehicles to choose from, like the Tundra iForce Max hybrid truck. Toyota SUVs take command on the road and on the trail, so you can explore the road less traveled without sacrificing smooth city rides in SUVs like the RAV4 and Grand Highlander. Toyota is a proud partner of CSU Athletics and the official vehicle of DNVR. Toyota, let's go places. Right now is also a great time to become a DNVR diehard. When you do, not only are you going to get a free shirt with your subscription, you're going to get access to all of our premium written content. We do really cool exclusive events for diehards. For instance, while I was out of town, we had a release party event with Fresh Tape Media for Gabe Landeskog's final part of his documentary. Landeskog was on the Abs show. If you missed that, go check it out. Some really great perspective from him on, the comeback process and overcoming doubt. He talked about how his kid likes to pretend he's Cale Makar and play out cutting his calf with the skate, which is just hearing that. It was like, oh, that's a little weird, but it's also hilarious. Little kids are just so funny. But go check that out. Again, there's just so many perks to being a diehard. You get deals at the bar, opportunities in the Discord, which all DNVR members are able to be part of. Check it out. The best way to support us is by being a DNVR diehard. All right. Putting a bow kind of on the recruiting talk here again. Expect significantly more commits over the next couple of weeks here. June has always been a very active month, but seeing this many prospects recruiting or committing on the spot it's something. And I really do think it speaks volumes to the potential for this program moving forward. And I think it also is a direct reflection of the investment that you've put in recruiting, hiring a general manager, going out and getting more recruiting personnel and taking a little bit of that pressure off of, the position coaches. There's just so much to manage. Like, I know it's easy to roll your eyes and be like, these coaches make how much? And they're complaining about everything that they have to do. The calendar is absurd. It really is no days off these days. And it is just so much to manage, especially because your players can just move at any point. It's not the NFL where it's like, all right, we got a couple of guys that are going to be free agents, but a lot of these guys are locked in. There's just so much movement right now. I really don't know how you could be successful in the modern era without really investing in, a personnel staff and a GM and then having somebody whose sole focus is just roster management. It's a full-time job. All right. Sean in the Toyota chat, he wanted to know, what do I think about Justin Marshall? I think Justin Marshall is in line to have a nice season. I think that it's going to be a running back by committee approach. I don't expect any of them to be 1,000-yard rushers or anything like that. Although I guess if I had to guess, I'm more in line to put my money on Jalen Dupree. I just think Dupree is a little bit more durable. I think Dupree has a chance to be like in the conversation for Mountain West, offensive player of the year at some point in his career. I mean, I think he can be that dynamic of a running back, but I think Justin Marshall is explosive. I think he's dynamic in the open field. And I think he's somebody who, if you can get him in space and you can maximize the way that you are using him, basically trying to like put him in a position to succeed. If you're running him up the gut, I don't know how successful you're going to be, pretty consistently, but if you can get him in space and you can let him use his quickness and you can let him, outrun some of these defenses, I think he can be really solid. And I think what's going to help him is that he's not going to have to, go for 20, 25 carries a game. Cause we've seen over the last couple of years, although he can be a playmaker for you. I mean, you don't go for 100 yards against that Texas defense without having some talent, but he does kind of wear down. And he's a little bit, smaller. I think he's a stud. I just think that he's somebody who you want to put him in a position to succeed by like being very specific with the way that you are using him in the offense. And I think that's exactly what the staff will do. And that's the benefit of having also Jalen Dupree and going out and getting Lloyd Avant from Tulsa. And then even on top of that, like Keegan Hollis, one healthy, just kind of demands to be on the field because of what he does in practice. That you bring Van Shield back, who I think will be more of a special teams contributor than the lead back he basically ended up having to be in 2023 before Marshall kind of came onto the scene there at the end of the year. But that's a very long-winded point, I know. But yeah, I think Marshall's a nice piece. I think he's somebody, especially if you use him the right way, can have a nice season. And I expect him to be a pretty significant contributor for CSU this year. Before we get out of here, I guess we can just kind of run through this here over the last 10 minutes. It is the 2-year anniversary of the Nuggets winning the first NBA championship. I was fortunate to be in the building for that win over the Heat. It was the coolest thing I've ever got to experience as a sports fan. I've been very fortunate in my life. I've talked about that. I had a grandpa who had Broncos season tickets, so I went to a lot of games growing up. I got to experience a lot of the Manning era in person. I went to the Rockies tiebreaker win against the Padres in 2007. That had always been number one for me, and it's still, in terms of atmosphere, I would say number one. But seeing the Nuggets win a title and Jokic hold up to Larry O'Brien, it was just surreal. It was kind of one of those moments that I never expected to experience as a sports fan. And it got me thinking, like, what are the moments for CSU over the last decade that have been that significant for me, that have, genuinely left me speechless, or like when I look back on them to this day, still think like, man, what an incredible moment. I'm so thankful that I was able to be there in person and witness it all. And, I think there have been many of those throughout my life, but we're just going to keep it simple, go and look back at the last decade or so. I think the Hughes finale is definitely up there. It was just a really special moment for the Fort Collins community. 50 years of history all coming together in one special night where CSU beats New Mexico. It was cold as hell on that night. One of the colder games I've been to. But I just remember, like they win the game and everybody goes on the field and you had so much excitement for the opening of Canvas Stadium. It was just a really nice way to, close out a special place in CSU history where there were so many great memories, like especially under Sonny Lubick. But I mean, even before that, the Rolling Stones played Hughes, Elton John played Hughes. Like it was a special place in a lot of our hearts. And I'm just really glad that things went basically picture perfect in that finale, because it really would have been a bummer had they gone out with a loss. You had to end the right way. And on the same vein, you had to open Canvas Stadium with the win. And the excitement that was in the building for that Oregon State win was unlike any other atmosphere we've had in Canvas since. And I think there's an opportunity for a lot of that buzz to come back. And that's not to say that there haven't been big moments, big wins, or like games where there was a lot of energy. I remember even like South Dakota State, coming off of COVID, that lightning delay happens, the stadium's juiced. I mean, it gave me goosebumps. Now the game, the way it played out, was obviously a big bummer. But that Oregon State win was just unreal. You had so much hope and excitement for the future. At that point, there was still belief that like Bobo could really, take the program to the next level. It didn't ultimately play out that way, and that season was a big part of why. But on that day in the finale, 40,000 fans in the stands or whatever it was to win that game and to win by like 30, it was special. And it makes me happy. If you go in the collegiate newsroom at CSU, there's still a copy of the sports special edition that we made and my story on that win. It's hanging up on the wall, and it was just a really special moment in CSU history. Joey says in the Toyota chat, CSU beating an SEC school in Canvas was a nice moment for CSU, even though Arkansas was a bottom tier SEC program. I went back and forth. I do think that you could put this in the conversation just because, as Joey says, the allure of, beating an SEC team like that holds a lot of weight doing that. They weren't a good program, and Chad Morris was not a good coach. They're up double digits. They keep running the ball. They're going for like 5.5 yards a pop. They win that game with ease. They got cute. They ended up pissing it away. CSU, to their credit, took advantage, won a crazy matchup. That 2018 season was just such a disaster that, like, even as fun as that night was, I don't hold it in the same regard as some of these other moments. Even like the Boise State comeback to me meant a little bit more, just because Boise had been this bully and this obstacle that you'd never been able to get through. And then to pull off the comeback the way that they did in 2023 and for it to end on a Hail Mary, like that's just one of those moments. If you were fortunate enough to stick around, many fans had already left at that point. But for those of us that were still in the building that night, it was unreal. And that was definitely one of those moments I'll always look back on and just shake my head and smile. I remember being in the locker room post game. It's the only time we've ever been granted locker room access, and I appreciate CSU for doing it. Seeing Norvell give the speech and seeing the way everybody's eyes lit up, and Tori talking about telling Dallin to be ready to catch the MF in football. It was just unreal, and it was a big moment. The CU Hoops win in December 2023. I mean, CU had 3 NBA players on that team. The Neat Clifford revenge angle. Isaiah Stevens had never beat CU at that point of his career. It was a really high quality back and forth basketball game at Moby. One of the better games in terms of quality that I would say I've covered in my career. That one stands out to me. Obviously, a win over a rival is always going to be a big deal. But just the quality of play that night was really fun. Maybe not quite on par with some of these other moments, but still a special win. I was going to say the Mountain West tournament run from this past season for basketball, but I just extended it to the entire run, the way they closed the regular season, going into the Mountain West tournament, winning the first championship since 2002. Being there in person for that meant a lot to me. I mean, I was 8 years old the last time they won a conference championship. I'd covered this program for a decade, and to see them finally break through and do it, it just really meant a lot to me. I was really close, to the staff. Obviously, like Medved was my guy. I'd been there since the beginning, tight with Ali too. So I'm really excited to see him and what he can do with the program. But I mean, that was unreal. And to be 4 seconds away from playing for a Sweet 16, it's one of those bittersweet things when you look back at how it ended in the end, because obviously the Rams kind of got jobbed there, but you're never going to get that call in that instance. I get it, but he walked, and that stinks because CSU was really the better team for much of that matchup and outplayed them. But that's how it goes sometimes. Beating Virginia and Dayton, I would say, was a pretty special moment too. I mean, like, anytime you get to go to the NCAA tournament is cool. I was fortunate to go to Indianapolis for the Roddy era. Obviously, that game was a bummer. You blow the halftime lead, lose to Michigan. But to finally win an NCAA tournament game for the first time in a decade, that was really exciting, especially because, it didn't look like we were going to get in there for a second. That was one of the more fun, chaotic experiences I've had professionally from a travel standpoint. You get home from Vegas, then you're on a plane to Dayton, like literally the next day. We found it on Sunday. On Monday night, I was on a plane for that Tuesday night game. So it was a whirlwind, and it stinks that they had to play on Thursday. After, I think if they play Texas on Friday, they'd win that game 9 times out of 10. But yeah, those were kind of some of the moments I look back on over the last decade that really stand out to me. Joey in the Toyota chat says, Justin, will CSU ever be in the rotation to play at South Bend, like Air Force, Nevada, UNLV, etc.? Potentially. I mean, I think it's a matchup that could happen if you're Notre Dame. Why would you be more inclined to play Nevada than CSU, other than maybe, I guess you could say CSU could be slightly more of an option to pull an upset. But I mean, if you're going to play Air Force, like Air Force is the ultimate wonky matchup, especially when you're not used to it. But I mean, you look at the teams that CSU scheduled in the last decade, Texas and Michigan and Oklahoma and all kinds of great matchups that they've played and are still going to play in the coming years. Washington this year. I don't think there's any reason to believe that it couldn't be an option down the line, especially if you continue to build your brand on a national level, make it an appealing matchup for Notre Dame. Sean says CSU will surprise a lot of people this year. I certainly think there's an opportunity to, with what you have on the roster and paper, with the continuity you have in the staff. I do think there's an opportunity for CSU, and I think that there's value. Like if you're looking at it from a betting standpoint, people are really high on Fresno, San Jose State as well. San Jose State, I think it's more about a respect for their staff as well as the fact that they don't have to play UNLV or Boise. But outside of what will probably be a definitely significantly more challenging conference slate, I do think that there's reason to believe the Rams can be really, really good this year. You just need some moving parts to come together fairly quickly on the defensive side, and that's always a toss-up in the portal era. But from a talent, from an athleticism standpoint, you like what this team has to work with going into the year. That's all I've got for you guys today. We'll be going live again tomorrow morning at 10. Next week, we'll get back to our traditional Wednesday and Friday schedule that we'd had going here the last couple of months. I appreciate everybody for the love they showed me on my birthday. Really means a lot. Always proud to be y'all. Peace.
We all silly like the mayor.